Every night, you disappear from your own story. You close your eyes. The room dissolves. Hours pass without appearing to pass. Then morning returns, and the person in the mirror assumes that one continuous self travelled through the darkness. But where were you? Perhaps you dreamed. Perhaps you remember a hallway that changed into a childhood home, or a face that belonged to two people at once. Perhaps there is only a blank interval between the last thought at night and the first thought at dawn. Does a blank memory mean there was no experience? If thinking stopped, did you stop? Descartes gave philosophy one of its most durable sentences: I think, therefore I am. The insight feels unbreakable. Doubt everything, and the act of doubting still reveals that something is happening. Deception cannot erase the occurrence of the thought being deceived. In the instant of thinking, existence cannot be denied without being performed. But the sentence hides a question at its edge. It tells us what is certain while thought is occurring. What does it tell us about the moment thought is absent? If I think, I am. If I do not think, what follows? Logic does not permit us to reverse the sentence automatically. If rain implies wet pavement, dry weather is not the only possible cause of a dry street. If thinking establishes existence, the absence of reported thought does not by itself establish non-existence. And yet, emotionally, many of us live as though the inner monologue were the thread holding the self together. The voice remembers your name. It rehearses your history. It explains what you want, what you fear, and what other people might be thinking about you. When it quiets, even briefly, the silence can feel peaceful. It can also feel like falling. Who are you without the sentence about who you are? Start with an ordinary interruption. You are walking home when a car horn breaks through thought. For one fraction of a second, there is only sound, movement, and the body turning. The commentary arrives afterward. That was close. Or you are absorbed in music, sport, prayer, painting, dancing, or difficult work. Time changes shape. Self-commentary recedes. Action remains precise. The person later says, I lost myself in it. But the body did not vanish. Perception did not necessarily vanish. Skill did not vanish. Something became less explicit, the narrative monitoring of the person performing the act. Losing the story of yourself is not the same as losing all experience. This distinction is easy to miss because the word thinking covers too much. It can mean inner speech, deliberate reasoning, imagery, memory, prediction, emotion, attention, or any mental activity at all. When someone says, my mind went blank, they may mean words stopped while sensation continued. They may mean they cannot remember the interval. They may mean they froze under pressure. They may mean consciousness was absent. These are not interchangeable events. So, before asking what happens when thinking stops, we must ask which kind of thinking and what evidence could show that it stopped. Consider sleep. For a long time, ordinary intuition divided the night into dreaming and nothing. Modern sleep research makes the boundary less simple. People can report experiences from different sleep stages, not only rapid eye movement sleep. Dreams may be vivid narratives, fragments of imagery, bodily sensations, or simple thought-like sequences. Reflective control is often weakened. The dreamer rarely pauses to test the world, even when the world becomes impossible. Consciousness can continue while critical reflection fades. Memory complicates the picture further. A person may be awakened and report an experience that would have been forgotten by morning. Some awakenings produce what researchers call white dreams, the conviction that an experience occurred without recoverable content. And when no experience is reported, the evidence remains limited by the reliability of recall. The blank morning is not a camera recording of the blank night. It is a report made by a waking brain about what it can retrieve. This does not mean dreamless sleep is impossible. It means absence of memory, absence of report, and absence of consciousness must be distinguished. The same caution matters in anesthesia, where the stakes are much higher. General anaesthetics do not simply press one universal off switch. Different agents and doses alter arousal, responsiveness, sensory connectedness, memory, and large-scale brain communication in different ways. A person may be unresponsive and later have no report. Another may have disconnected experience, resembling a dream. Rarely, connected awareness can occur during a procedure. From the outside, immobility is not always identical to absence. From the inside, amnesia is not always proof that nothing happened. Researchers therefore separate dimensions that everyday language bundles together: wakefulness, connectedness to the environment, the ability to respond, subjective experience, and continuity through time. Anesthesia is valuable to consciousness science precisely because these features can come apart. But here is the question most people miss. If experience can occur without later memory, what makes the experience yours? Is ownership created only when the autobiographical narrator files the event into your history? Or can an experience belong to a subject in the moment, even if the story never keeps it? Imagine one painful second that is immediately forgotten. If it was genuinely felt, forgetting would not make the pain unreal while it occurred. Now imagine a joyful second that leaves no trace. Its disappearance from biography would not retroactively cancel its presence. Memory is one way the self reaches across time. It may not be the only feature that gives an experience first personal character. Phenomenology enters here with a careful proposal. Some philosophers argue that conscious experience has a pre-reflective self-givenness. When you see a red door, you don't normally need a second thought saying, "This seeing belongs to me," before the seeing is conscious. Experience is not first anonymous and then stamped with ownership by reflection. The point is not that a hidden soul watches every perception. It is that explicit self-reflection may depend on a more basic first personal structure already present in experience. You can test the intuition without solving the theory. Look at an object near you before naming it. Hear the farthest sound in the room. Feel the temperature on the skin. For a moment there may be experience without a sentence about experience. Then language arrives and says, "I am hearing the air conditioner." The statement makes the event available for report. It may not be what made the sound present in the first place. This is one possible answer to cogito interrupted. The thinking self, understood as explicit narrator, can become quiet while a more immediate field of perception remains. But do not move too quickly. A silent interval is not automatically pure consciousness. The absence of inner speech may leave images, moods, bodily predictions, and non-verbal concepts. A person may feel no thought because thought is being defined only as words. The mind can become quiet in one register while remaining active in others. There is also a dangerous romance around not thinking. People under extreme stress can freeze, dissociate, or lose access to language. Exhaustion can flatten reflection. Neurological conditions can disrupt awareness. Silence is not always liberation. A gap can be peaceful, pathological, protective, or impossible to classify from a poetic description alone. Context matters. So does method. Trying to force the mind into blankness is different from becoming absorbed, falling asleep, receiving anesthesia, or practicing meditation. Thought suppression recruits monitoring. Is the forbidden thought gone yet? The attempt can keep the target mentally relevant and may be followed by rebound, although the evidence is more variable than popular summaries suggest. The command "do not think" is still a thought organising attention. The harder it checks for silence, the louder the measurement becomes. This is why the most useful everyday practice is not to chase non-thought as an achievement. It is to notice what remains when commentary briefly loosens: sensation, action, emotion, relation, and the capacity to respond. Now the story turns toward the most radical reports. Some contemplative traditions describe brief cessation events in advanced practice. In these accounts, consciousness itself is said to become momentarily absent, followed by a recognition that an interruption occurred. A recent intensively sampled case study examined one highly experienced meditator using EEG around reported cessation events and found physiological changes associated with those reports. The finding is intriguing. It is not a final answer. The study involved one person. The event labels depended on the practitioner's reports and a particular contemplative framework. EEG can reveal patterns of electrical activity at the scalp, but it cannot directly display an absence of subjective experience. And the phrase "awareness of absence" is logically delicate. If consciousness was truly absent during the interval, the later recognition is not an observer remaining inside the absence. It is a subsequent mind inferring that a break occurred. A film can contain a missing frame without a witness living in the missing frame. The next frame can reveal discontinuity. This distinction protects the mystery from exaggeration. The report may point to a real, unusual, trainable event. It does not prove that consciousness watched itself disappear. It does not prove a soul left the brain and returned. It does not authorise a general claim about what happens to every self when thought stops. Good inquiry can be astonished without becoming careless. There is a second philosophical possibility. Perhaps the self is not one thing that either remains fully present or vanishes. Perhaps selfhood is a collection of processes operating at different scales. There is the body maintaining temperature and posture. There is the minimal orientation of experience from here rather than there. There is agency, the sense that an action is mine. There is autobiographical memory. There is social identity. There is the verbal narrator explaining the whole arrangement. These layers can change independently. In a dream, a world and point of view may remain while critical reflection weakens. In skilled absorption, agency and perception may continue while self-evaluation fades. Under anesthesia, responsiveness and connectedness may disappear before or without every form of experience. In deep dreamless intervals, consciousness may be absent. In meditation, a person may report unusual reductions of content, self-modelling or continuity. The question, did the self disappear, may be too coarse. Which self-process changed? Which remained? What evidence is available from behaviour, physiology, immediate report and later memory? This layered view can sound less dramatic than discovering an eternal witness, but it may be more personally useful. The inner monologue is not the sole owner of your life. Before it explains courage, the body may already stand. Before it constructs love into a theory, attention may already soften toward another face. Before it turns grief into identity, grief may move as breath, pressure, heat, and tears. The narrator is powerful. It coordinates time. It protects commitments. It lets you say what happened and ask what should happen next. Without narrative, moral responsibility and long-term planning would be severely altered.
But a narrator can mistake its importance for totality. It writes the history and then claims it fought every battle alone. What changes if you stop believing that every moment must be narrated to be real? Eating can become taste again. Walking can become contact with the ground. Listening can become an encounter rather than preparation for your reply. Rest can become a biological event instead of a performance review. This is not anti-intellectual. Thought is one of the great capacities of human life. Reason can expose deception, build medicine, imagine justice, and revise inherited cruelty. The point is not to escape thought. It is to stop demanding that thought continuously certify existence. You do not disappear when you are not explaining yourself. At least, ordinary silent experience gives no reason to think you do. The harder cases remain open. When consciousness is genuinely absent, there may be no experience to own. From a first-person perspective, the interval does not feel like endless darkness. Darkness would already be content. It appears later as no remembered duration at all. This is why anesthesia can feel instantaneous even when hours passed. The clock moved, the body changed, other people waited, but no continuous remembered scene bridges the two shores. The interruption raises a haunting question about personal continuity. If the stream can break and the person returns, what makes the person after the gap the same one? The body is continuous. The brain retains structures, memories, habits, and relationships. Other people preserve your place in their world. The waking narrator inherits the unfinished projects of the one who went under. Sameness may be carried by continuity of organization, not by an unbroken spotlight of awareness. A song can pause and resume because the pattern, instrument, score, and players persist. The silence does not play the melody. It does not necessarily destroy the music either. But the metaphor has limits. Human beings are not songs stored in one place. The continuity of a person is biological, psychological, social, legal, and moral. No single comparison settles it, and nothing here proves what happens at death. Sleep and anesthesia are reversible states in living brains. Using them as direct evidence for immortality would outrun the data. Using them as proof that the self is an illusion would also outrun the data. They show something more precise. Consciousness, memory, responsiveness, thought, and identity can dissociate in ways ordinary language hides. The cogito remains powerful within its proper boundary. Its boundary becomes clearer if we imagine 4 interruptions that look similar from far away. In the first, you stare through a window and inner speech pauses while color, depth, and sound remain vivid. This is not obvious unconsciousness. It may be ordinary nonverbal experience. In the second, you perform a practiced movement with little self-commentary. The tennis player returns the serve. The pianist lands on the next chord. Deliberate calculation is reduced, but perception, prediction, and action continue. In the third, you wake with no memory of several hours. The missing narrative could include unremembered dreams, dreamless conscious experience, or unconscious intervals. Retrospective blankness cannot separate them by itself.
In the fourth, a medical intervention profoundly disrupts the brain processes supporting experience. Here, consciousness may genuinely be absent, although behavioural unresponsiveness and later amnesia are not perfect stand-ins for that fact. One phrase, no thought, can be applied to all 4. The mechanisms and implications are radically different. This is why language is not just decoration in consciousness research. The way a question is framed determines what counts as evidence. If thought means inner speech, a wordless visual experience qualifies as no thought. If thought means any structured mental content, the same experience does not. If self means autobiographical narration, skilled absorption looks selfless. If self means any first-personal organisation of experience, it may not. Arguments can appear to disagree while using different maps. The same problem occurs when people describe ego death. One person may mean relief from self-criticism, another may mean loss of body boundaries, another may mean a later interpretation of an intense altered state, a fourth may mean a clinical disruption of identity. The emotional power of the phrase does not make these events equivalent. Care begins with refusing to flatten them. There is also an ethical reason not to worship interruption. A stable sense of self can be hard won. For someone recovering from trauma, feeling present in the body and continuous through time may be healing, not an illusion to transcend. For someone living with dissociation, the instruction to dissolve the self may be destabilising. For someone whose voice has been ignored, building a coherent narrative may be an act of survival. No philosophy of silence should require a person to surrender the boundaries that keep them safe.
The aim is not less self at any cost. It is a more flexible self, able to narrate when narration helps, able to rest when it does not, able to remember without being imprisoned by memory, and able to enter relation without disappearing into another person's demands. Seen this way, the interruption is not automatically enlightenment. It is information. It reveals that one process can loosen while others remain. What we do with that information depends on the life around it. Maybe the most mature form of no thought is not a spectacular void. It is the ordinary second in which insult does not become retaliation, fear does not become prophecy, and self-explanation does not drown out another person's reality. In that second, thinking has not been defeated. It has been placed back inside a larger intelligence that includes body, context, memory, relationship, and choice. While thinking occurs, the occurrence cannot honestly be denied, but existence may be wider than the explicit sentence that confirms it. A living person can perceive without narrating, act without self-commentary, dream without critical reflection, and pass through intervals that leave no autobiographical trace. The interruption does not give us one answer. It gives us a better map of the question. So try one modest practice, not to stop thought, but to observe its edges. For 1 minute, let sounds arrive before naming them. Feel one breath before counting it. Notice the exact instant a sentence forms, then notice the moment after it ends. Do not hunt for a mystical gap. Do not grade the silence. If another thought arrives immediately, that is the event to notice. Ask what changed between sensation, wording, recognition, and memory. You may discover that thought is less like a solid wall and more like a series of arrivals. Between them, life is not necessarily absent. It may be too immediate to have become commentary yet. And if the exercise creates fear, stop. Open your eyes. Name the room. Contact someone you trust. Philosophy should not turn distress into a spiritual test. The goal is clarity, not disappearance. Perhaps that is the most honest response to Descartes, I think. And the thought reveals that experience is occurring now. Then the sentence ends. Sound remains. Breath remains. The body remains in relation to a world. Another thought begins and finds continuity waiting for it. Sometimes the gap was conscious but wordless. Sometimes it was a failure of memory. Sometimes consciousness itself may have been absent. We cannot decide which merely because the interval feels blank in retrospect. The self is not proven eternal by the silence. The self is not proven unreal by the interruption. What is proven is smaller, stranger, and closer to daily life. The voice in your head is not active in the same way at every moment, yet the person you call yourself is carried by more than that voice alone. So when thought stops, even briefly, do not rush to fill the space with a conclusion. Listen for what remains. And in the comments, answer this. Have you ever experienced a moment with no inner words, and did it feel like absence, presence, or something language cannot hold?